Nicki Minaj is done for. The Barbs are screaming betrayal as their queen just detonated her entire legacy in real time. This whole situation has the internet spinning because what she just did, nobody saw coming. And trust me, what happens next will break the culture forever. This is already too late to undo. Everybody thought they knew who Nicki Minaj was. The fearless rap icon, the one who clapped back at industry politics and refused to bow down to anyone. That was the version we defended for years, the version we rolled for through every scandal, every beef, every breakdown. But now, everything just flipped. New footage dropped, statements surfaced, alignments got exposed, and the whole narrative is twisting in ways nobody could have predicted. Because Nicki didn't just change her mind quietly. She walked straight into the most explosive political battlefield in America, smiled for the cameras, and left her fan base shattered in the wreckage. This isn't speculation anymore. This is happening right now. Let me break this down from the beginning because the layers here are insane. It started with whispers, quiet murmurs online that Nicki had been liking certain posts that leaned different. Political posts, conservative talking points, MAGA-adjacent content. At first, fans brushed it off. Accidents happen, algorithms are weird, maybe she was doing research, maybe someone else had her phone. But then, the tweet dropped. Nicki Minaj, out of nowhere, inserted herself into California's trans policy debate. And I'm not talking about a vague statement. I'm talking about a full-on political stance that directly challenged protections for trans youth in schools. The wording was sharp, the tone was firm, and the internet exploded. Screenshots spread like wildfire across every platform. Twitter timelines became war zones. Instagram comment sections turned into battlefields. TikTok creators started stitching and duetting with reactions that ranged from confused to devastated to outright furious. Fans who had defended Nicki through everything suddenly froze, because this wasn't just an opinion, this was positioning. This was alignment, and it was happening in real time, with no explanation. But that was just the spark. The real shockwave hit when footage surfaced of Nicki Minaj appearing at a Turning Point USA event. And listen, this wasn't a casual appearance. This wasn't backstage or in the crowd. She was front and center, featured, elevated, smiling, polished, unbothered. Turning Point USA, an organization deeply tied to conservative youth movements, MAGA ideology, and Trump-era politics. And there she was, nodding along, clapping, engaging with talking points she had never publicly championed before. The optics alone were catastrophic. TMZ picked it up within hours. Clips started circulating, fan accounts that once posted nothing but praise suddenly went silent or switched to confusion threads. And online detectives, because that's what fans become when trust breaks, started digging deeper. They pulled up old interviews where Nicki criticized Trump. They found past statements where she spoke about misogyny, immigration fears, and protecting marginalized communities. They compared her 2016 energy to her 2024 positioning, and folks online swear the contradiction is brutal. Frame by frame, people analyzed her body language at the event. Was she uncomfortable? Was she confident? Was this calculated or coerced? Fans studied every smile, every nod, every moment of applause. They zoomed in on who she was standing next to. They researched who introduced her. They tracked who she followed and unfollowed in the days leading up to it. And here's where it gets even crazier. Reports started surfacing, unconfirmed but loud, that Nicki's presence at the event wasn't just symbolic. Sources claim she was being positioned as a cultural bridge, a way to pull new demographics into spaces they traditionally avoided. Whether intentional or not, her image was being used as a magnet, and the internet saw it happening in real time. But the most damaging part? The silence. No sit-down interview explaining her views, no Instagram Live clearing the air, no tweet thread breaking down her thought process. Just nothing. And in the age of instant communication, silence is the loudest message you can send. Fans started asking questions, valid questions, like why now? Why this topic? Why this organization? And when no answers came, speculation filled the void. Some said it was about protection. Others said it was about influence. A few whispered it was about survival, but nobody knew for sure, and that uncertainty became the fuel that turned confusion into full-blown chaos. Meanwhile, the Barbs, once a united digital army, started fracturing. Some stood 10 toes down, refusing to abandon their queen no matter what. Others quietly unfollowed, hearts broken but boundaries set. A third group got loud, calling out what they saw as betrayal and demanding accountability. And through it all, critics popped popcorn and hit record. Because this wasn't just drama, this was a cultural moment, a case study in parasocial collapse, a real-time example of what happens when an artist's identity no longer aligns with the community that built them. By the time allegations of transphobic messaging at the event started circulating, the damage was already spreading. For a fan base deeply rooted in LGBTQ+ loyalty, a fan base that includes countless queer fans who rode for Nicki through every career high and low, the emotional fallout was devastating. What once looked like confidence now looked like disconnection. What once felt fearless now felt cold. Now let's get into the motive, because this is where everything starts clicking into place. And I want to be clear, this is speculation based on public information, online theories, and patterns people are connecting. But when you start laying it all out, it paints a picture. First, let's talk about immigration anxiety. And yeah, this is uncomfortable, but it's part of the conversation happening online. Nicki has spoken in the past about her immigration journey, her family's status, and the legal complexities that come with citizenship and travel. These aren't new concerns. But what is new is the timing of this political pivot. Critics are asking, is this about ideology or is this about access? Because aligning with certain political movements can open doors that were previously closed, doors that affect travel, legal positioning, and long-term security. And when you're navigating a system that's already complicated, those doors start looking real important. Now, add another layer. Kenneth Petty, Nicki's husband, a man whose criminal past has been dragged through the headlines repeatedly, a man whose legal complications and travel restrictions have been well documented. Online narratives continue to pull his history back into the spotlight, questioning whether his situation is influencing decisions being made in public. People are asking, is Nicki making moves to secure legal protections? Is she positioning herself in ways that could benefit her family's long-term stability? Is this about survival more than ideology? And listen, I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm saying that's what people are speculating, because when explanations aren't given, speculation becomes the narrative. Now, let's talk about the career angle, because Nicki Minaj isn't struggling. She's still a titan, still breaking records, still commanding stages. But the industry has shifted. New artists are rising, younger audiences are forming their own loyalties, and staying relevant in a space that's constantly evolving requires constant adaptation. Some believe Nicki's move into political spaces is a calculated rebrand, a way to tap into new audiences that traditional rap fan bases don't cover. A way to create conversations that transcend music, a way to position herself as more than just an artist, but as a cultural influencer with political weight. If that's the case, it's a high-risk strategy, because you're not just gaining new supporters, you're potentially losing the ones who built you. And in Nicki's case, that loss is happening at scale. But here's where the theory gets darker. Some fans believe this isn't about Nicki at all. They believe her influence is being leveraged, that she's being used as a visibility magnet to pull demographics into spaces they wouldn't normally enter. Her image, her name, her platform are tools in a much larger game. And whether that's true or not, the optics support it, because when you appear at politically charged events, smile next to controversial figures, and don't clarify your stance, people fill in the blanks, and those blanks rarely favor you. Then there's the jealousy angle. And yeah, this one's messy, but it's part of the discourse, because around the same time Nicki's political moves started making waves, Cardi B re-entered the chat. Sources whispered that Cardi saw this coming, that she distanced herself from certain circles for a reason, that she recognized patterns before they became public. Whether that's true or just fanfiction doesn't matter, because the narrative stuck, and narratives have power. They shape perception. They influence how people interpret actions. They create emotional frameworks that facts alone can't undo. And here's the thing about Nicki's history. She's been in beasts before. She's clapped back harder than anyone. She's defended herself with precision and fury. But this time, the response feels different. It feels defensive instead of dominant, reactive instead of controlled. And that shift is what's scaring people, because the Nicki they knew would have addressed this head on. She would have gone live. She would have tweeted a thread. She would have dropped bars. But instead, there's silence. And that silence is reading as strategy or surrender. Put all of this together, the immigration concerns, the legal complications, the career pressures, the political positioning, the fan fracture, and you get a perfect storm. A situation where every move feels loaded, where every statement gets dissected, where every silence becomes a weapon. And the saddest part? The people caught in the middle are the fans, the ones who defended her through every controversy, the ones who streamed her music through every drought, the ones who believed in her voice even when the industry didn't. Those fans are now being asked to choose between loyalty and values, and that's a choice nobody should have to make. But here's the part that really hits different. The part that goes beyond politics and celebrity drama. The part that's about people. Because this isn't just about Nicki Minaj making a controversial choice. This is about the millions of fans, real human beings, who are now processing grief, confusion, and betrayal in real time. Let's talk about the queer barbs, the LGBTQ+ fans who saw Nicki as a safe space, who blasted her music at Pride, who quoted her lyrics as affirmations of self-love and confidence, who defended her fiercely because they believed she represented them. Those fans are now watching her align with movements and messages that actively oppose their existence, their rights, their safety. That's not just disappointing, that's traumatic. Imagine spending years of your life supporting someone, buying albums, streaming songs, defending them in comment sections, wearing their merch, attending their concerts, building part of your identity around the community they created, and then watching them take a stance that feels like a direct rejection of who you are. That's what thousands of fans are experiencing right now, and the pain is real. Then there's the parents. The ones who saw Nicki as a symbol of empowerment for their daughters, who appreciated her unapologetic confidence, her refusal to shrink, her ability to dominate in male-dominated spaces. Those parents are now grappling with whether her platform still represents the values they want their children to absorb. And it's not just about politics, it's about the message. Because when you publicly align with movements that some communities view as harmful, you're not just making a personal choice. You're making a statement about who you stand with and who you stand against. The emotional toll of that realization is hitting fans in waves. Some are angry, some are sad, some are numb, some are in denial, still hoping for a clarification that might never come. And here's what makes it worse. Nicki hasn't acknowledged their pain. No statement saying, "I hear you." No recognition of the hurt her actions caused. Just silence. And to people who loved her, that silence feels like abandonment. This is somebody's idol, somebody's inspiration, somebody's soundtrack to survival. And they're watching that foundation crack in real time with no explanation, no apology, no closure. The forums are full of heartbreak. Fans writing essays about what Nicki meant to them, threads documenting their journey from devotion to disillusionment. Comments from people who are crying because it feels like losing a friend, a mentor, a piece of themselves. And that's the human cost of all this. The part that doesn't get measured in streams or headlines. The part that lives in the quiet moments when someone deletes a playlist, unfollows an account, or realizes the person they looked up to doesn't see them the same way they thought. That's the layer nobody's talking about enough. But it's the one that's going to linger long after the news cycle moves on. Now let's circle back to the evidence, because new details keep surfacing and this story is evolving fast. After that Turning Point USA appearance, the internet went into full investigative mode. And when I say investigative, I mean fans turned into digital forensics experts. They weren't just reacting anymore, they were analyzing. Breaking down every frame, cross-referencing timelines, building databases of receipts. First, they pulled every interview Nicki ever did where politics came up. And guess what they found? Contradictions. Big ones. In 2016, Nicki expressed concern about Trump's policies. She talked about how his rhetoric made her uncomfortable. She mentioned fears about immigration enforcement. She highlighted the importance of protecting marginalized communities. All of that is documented, archived, time-stamped. Now compare that to 2024, standing at a MAGA-adjacent event, smiling next to figures who championed the exact policies she once criticized, and offering no explanation for the shift. Fans started making side-by-side comparison videos, old Nicki versus new Nicki. The contrast was jarring, and those videos went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments, people tagging her account demanding answers. But the digging didn't stop there. Online detectives started tracking her social media activity in the weeks leading up to the event. They noticed she'd been liking posts from conservative commentators, following accounts tied to right-wing movements, engaging with content that didn't match her previous public persona. At first, fans thought maybe her account was hacked. Maybe someone on her team was managing it poorly. But then more evidence piled up. Screenshots of likes, records of follows, patterns that suggested this wasn't accidental. Then came the deep dive into the Turning Point USA event itself. Fans found the full footage, not just the clips that went viral, the entire event, and they started analyzing everything. Who introduced her? What was said before she appeared? What was the context of her presence? Was she a guest speaker or just an attendee? And most importantly, what message was she endorsing by being there? People started slowing down frames, zooming in on her expressions, reading her body language like a mystery novel. Some swore she looked uncomfortable. Others argued she looked confident. A third group said she looked detached, like she was playing a role. And here's where it gets technical. Fans who work in media, psychology, and public relations started weighing in. They broke down the optics of her appearance, the strategic placement, the camera angles, the way her image was being used in promotional materials after the fact. They pointed out that regardless of her intentions, her presence was being weaponized, used as proof that Black women, hip-hop culture, and younger demographics were shifting politically. And whether she meant to or not, she became a symbol of that narrative. Then, the allegations about transphobic messaging at the event started circulating. Reports claimed that during the event, rhetoric targeting trans youth was amplified, that policies restricting trans rights was celebrated, that language many consider harmful was normalized. And Nicki was there, in the room, on stage, part of the program. For a fan base that includes a massive LGBTQ+ community, that was the breaking point. Because it's one thing to have personal political beliefs, it's another thing to publicly platform movements that actively work against the safety and rights of your own supporters. Fans started pulling receipts of past statements where Nicki expressed support for LGBTQ+ rights, moments where she celebrated her queer fans, interviews where she talked about inclusivity and acceptance, and they placed those moments side by side with her current positioning. The cognitive dissonance was too much to ignore. Then came the response from other celebrities. Some stayed silent, others subtly distanced themselves. A few made vague posts that fans interpreted as shade, and one name kept coming up in the discourse: Cardi B. Rumors started swirling that Cardi had seen this shift coming, that she distanced herself for a reason, that private conversations had happened behind the scenes. None of this was confirmed, but the speculation took on its own life. Fans started comparing the two artists' recent political stances. Cardi had been vocal about progressive causes. She'd used her platform to advocate for social justice. She'd engaged with political figures on the opposite end of the spectrum from where Nicki now appeared to be. And whether intentional or not, that contrast made Nicki's positioning look even more stark. It created a narrative of two queens on opposite sides of a culture war. And that narrative spread like gasoline on fire. Meanwhile, Nicki's team stayed silent. No press releases, no clarifications, no damage control that fans could see. And that silence allowed the internet to write its own story. A story that got darker and more conspiratorial with every passing day. Theories ranged from the plausible to the wild. Some believed it was a strategic rebrand. Others thought she was being manipulated. A few even suggested she was held in some way, legally, financially, or otherwise, and had no choice but to comply. And here's the thing about conspiracy theories. They thrive in the absence of information. The less Nicki said, the more people speculated. And the more they speculated, the deeper the narrative rabbit hole became. By the end of the week, the discourse had completely spiraled. What started as confusion had turned into full-blown cultural warfare. Timelines were divided, group chats were fractured, friendships were tested over whether to continue supporting her or not. And at the center of it all was Nicki Minaj, silent, unbothered, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. Now, this whole situation gets even crazier when you realize this isn't happening in a vacuum. There's a bigger context here that makes everything feel even more chaotic. Let's talk about the current state of celebrity politics, because Nicki isn't the first artist to make a controversial political move, and she won't be the last. But what makes her situation unique is the timing and the audience. We're living in an era where every celebrity action is dissected in real time, where one tweet can end a career, where silence is interpreted as complicity, where fans expect their idols to be activists, educators, and moral compasses all at once. And that's a lot of pressure. Some argue that celebrities shouldn't be held to those standards, that they're artists, not politicians, that their job is to entertain, not to lead social movements. And there's validity to that argument. But here's the counter. When you build a brand on empowerment, when you sell confidence and fearlessness, when you position yourself as a voice for the voiceless, you can't suddenly switch lanes without backlash because you taught your audience to expect more from you. Nicki built her empire on being unapologetically herself, on refusing to bow down, on clapping back at anyone who challenged her. And fans loved that energy. They needed that energy, especially fans from marginalized communities who saw her as a reflection of their own defiance. So when she pivots in a way that feels like bowing down, whether to political pressure, legal necessity, or personal belief, it shatters the foundation of what she represented. Now let's talk about the broader hip-hop landscape, because this isn't just about Nicki. This is about a shift happening across the culture. We've seen other rappers make questionable political moves. We've watched legends align with figures that their younger fans oppose. We've witnessed the generational divide in how artists view power, access, and influence. Older artists often see political connections as strategy, a way to secure bags, open doors, and protect their empires. Younger audiences see those same connections as betrayal, a selling out of values for proximity to power. And neither side is entirely wrong, but the clash between those perspectives is creating massive friction in the culture. Then there's the role of social media, because 20 years ago, this would have played out differently. Nicki could have made this move, and fans might have heard about it through a magazine article weeks later. There would have been time to process, space to reflect, room for nuance. But now, everything happens instantly. The footage drops, the tweets fly, the discourse explodes, and there's no pause button, no cooling off period. Just raw, immediate reaction that spirals out of control before anyone can even catch their breath. And platforms profit from that chaos. Algorithms push the most inflammatory takes to the top. Engagement metrics reward outrage over understanding. The most extreme voices get the most visibility. And the result is a discourse that's less about truth and more about spectacle. Nicki's situation is a perfect example of that machine in action. The story isn't just being reported, it's being amplified, distorted, and monetized by every platform, every creator, every news outlet looking for clicks. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise is a real person making real decisions. Decisions that we might never fully understand. Decisions that are probably way more complicated than any headline could capture. But the internet doesn't do nuance. The internet does narratives. And once a narrative takes hold, it's almost impossible to change. So now we're left with this. A rap icon at the center of a cultural firestorm, a fan base fractured beyond repair, a discourse that's more about sides than understanding, and a future that's completely uncertain. Because here's the question nobody can answer yet. Can Nicki recover from this? Some say yes. They point to her legacy, her catalog, her undeniable talent. They argue that time will soften the blow, that fans will eventually come back, that this will just become another chapter in a long, complicated career. Others say no. They argue that trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt, that parasocial relationships are fragile, that the damage is already done, that no amount of new music or public apologies can undo the hurt caused by this moment. And honestly, both could be true, because recovery isn't universal. Some fans will move on, some will forgive, some will forget, and some will carry this betrayal with them forever, a reminder that even icons are human, and humans disappoint us. What we're seeing here is bigger than Nicki Minaj. This is about the collapse of parasocial trust in real time, and that has implications for every artist, every influencer, every public figure moving forward. Because here's the truth. We're in the middle of a cultural reckoning. Fans are no longer willing to blindly support people just because they're talented. They're demanding alignment. They're demanding accountability. They're demanding that the people they give their time, money, and emotional energy to actually represent the values they claim to hold. And when that alignment breaks, the fallout is swift and brutal. This isn't just about politics. This is about authenticity. It's about whether the person we see on stage is the same person making decisions behind closed doors. And when those two versions don't match, audiences feel lied to. The bigger conversation happening here is about the responsibility of influence. When you have millions of followers, when your words reach across continents, when your actions shape culture, what do you owe those people? Some say nothing, that artists don't owe fans anything beyond their art, that personal beliefs and public personas can be separate, that we're asking too much of entertainers. But others argue that influence comes with responsibility, that when you accept the platform, you accept the accountability that comes with it, that you can't build an empire on the backs of marginalized fans and then turn around and support systems that harm them. And this debate isn't new. But it's getting louder because we're watching it play out in real time with someone as massive as Nicki Minaj. The question moving forward is, how will other artists respond? Will they learn from this and move more carefully? Will they overcorrect and become so cautious that they lose their authenticity? Or will they double down, deciding that they'd rather be polarizing than palatable? There's no right answer, but the landscape is shifting, and artists who don't recognize that shift risk becoming casualties of it. For fans, the lesson is equally complicated, because at some point we have to grapple with the fact that the people we idolize are human, flawed, evolving, capable of disappointing us in ways we never imagined. And maybe the healthiest approach is to enjoy the art without building our identities around the artist, to appreciate the music without expecting the person behind it to be a perfect reflection of our values, to recognize that inspiration can come from imperfect sources. But that's easier said than done, especially when the connection feels so personal, so deep, so real. What's clear is this. The relationship between artists and fans is changing. The power dynamics are shifting, and moments like this one with Nicki Minaj are accelerating that transformation. So, where does this leave us? Because the story isn't over, not by a long shot. In fact, it feels like we're still in the early stages of whatever this is becoming. Reports are saying more details are coming, more footage, more statements, more revelations that could either clarify everything or make it infinitely worse. And the internet is ready. Phones charged, notifications on, popcorn popped. But here's what we know for sure. Nicki Minaj's empire is no longer untouchable. The foundation has cracks, the fan base is fractured, and the trust that took years to build has been shattered in a matter of weeks. Some fans are holding out hope for a redemption arc, a moment where Nicki sits down, explains everything, and makes it make sense, where she acknowledges the hurt, addresses the contradictions, and rebuilds the bridge she burned. But others have already moved on, unfollowed, unsubscribed, deleted the playlists. They're not waiting for an explanation because they don't believe one will come, or they don't believe it will matter. And then there's the group that's watching with morbid curiosity. Not necessarily fans, not necessarily haters, just observers fascinated by the train wreck. The ones who will screenshot every tweet, archive every post, and document this moment for internet history. Because that's what this is now. History, a case study, a cautionary tale, a moment that will be referenced years from now when discussing celebrity downfalls and parasocial collapse. The speculation about what happens next is wild. Some think she'll double down, lean into the controversy, build a new audience on the other side of the political spectrum, rebrand completely. Others think she'll retreat, go silent for a while, let the storm pass, then return with new music and hope everyone forgets. A few believe she'll address it head-on, finally break the silence, give the interview, drop the explanation, fight for her legacy. But nobody knows, and that uncertainty is part of what makes this so gripping. Because we're watching a legend navigate the biggest crisis of her career in real time, and every move she makes, or doesn't make, will determine whether she survives this or becomes a cautionary tale. What's undeniable is this: something fundamental has broken. The image is shattered, the trust is gone, and no matter what happens next, Nicki Minaj will never be seen the same way again. Whether that's a tragedy or an evolution depends on who you ask, but one thing is certain: this chapter can't be undone. Every move from here on out is a trigger, and the internet is watching mercilessly. Stay locked in, because this story is still unfolding. We're getting more information by the hour, more receipts surfacing, more theories forming, and reports say Nicki might finally be preparing to address everything publicly. So you do not want to miss what comes next. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think Nicki can recover from this? Do you think she owes fans an explanation? And do you believe her silence is strategic, or is it surrender? Because I want to hear your take on this. The discourse is real and everybody's got an opinion. And listen, whether you're Team Nicki, Team Disappointed, or Team just here for the drama, this moment is massive. This is one of those cultural shifts that we'll look back on years from now and remember exactly where we were when it happened. Make sure you smash that like button if you made it this far. Hit subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss a single update, because I'm covering every twist, every turn, every bombshell that drops in this saga. We're going deep, we're going detailed, and we're not stopping until we have the full story. I appreciate every single one of you for rocking with me through this breakdown. I know it's heavy, I know it's complicated, but these are the moments that matter. These are the conversations that shape culture, and I'm grateful you're here to process it with me. Before you go, check out the next video on screen, because we're diving even deeper into celebrity political controversies and the patterns that keep repeating. You're going to want to see that. Stay safe out there. Protect your energy. Remember that parasocial relationships are real, but they're not reality. And most importantly, stay critical, stay questioning, and never let anyone, celebrity or otherwise, make you compromise your values for loyalty. I'll see you in the next one, and trust me, it's about to get even crazier.